Hello YouTube. So today we're gonna take a look at this car, MGHS 2021 model, which I believe is still the latest model around here in many parts of the world. This model in particular is running on the 1.5 litre turbo engine mated with dual clutch transmission. I think it's 6 or 7 gears. I'll check it out later. But right now I'm cruising on a highway towards Chiang Mai, Thailand. As you can see, it's windy. It's really windy. It's going through quite a lot of terrain, and yeah, I'm gonna put it through the paces as just a layman, a normal driver, going through some terrain, going a bit of off-roading and city driving and so on and so forth. And as I say, I'll put it through the paces, and we'll see how the car performs. So I've rented this car over the past week or so, and it's quite a nice car to drive in a relaxed setting. But then as I went to the mountainous areas, as I went up steep hills, that's when the engine and the transmission really just it's not really geared for that kind of purpose. I'll explain more in a bit, but currently I'm not sure if you can hear it, but the roads are quite rough. But then the soundproofing of the car is not bad. It's very, very decent actually. I can't really hear much noises or road noises coming into the car. The profile has been lowered down, so it sounds quite deep, probably below what our ears can discern. Handling wise, it's pretty decent. It's powered by electronic power steering, and the setting changes with what mode you select. So let's say right now I select I'm currently on custom mode, so I've set the steering and all to eco, but the air conditioning to normal. That's custom mode. And then there's also sport, and there's also normal, eco, and finally there's also the super sport mode, which seems to boost the responsiveness of the throttle, and also the steering, and as well as the turbo and the transmission, from what I have tested. Alright, let's take a quick walk around the car. So start with the grille. It's quite a nice design, modern, with a nice big badge here. Underneath is part of the 360 camera. Quite reminiscent of the newer Mercedes or Mazda models. Then down there it's the radar sensor, which well, isn't working, so there's that. Then there's fog lamps right here, halogen, and then this is LED lights. So the headlights are LEDs. Comes with this nice DRL / turn signals. So moving on, comes standard with alloy wheels. That's nice. This is 18-inch. You may get 17-inch, but it depends on the model. Quite nice. Alright, so that's another part of the 360-degree camera. It does come with keyless entry. Another, well, it's quite standard nowadays, but yeah, it's worth a note. Alright, so the design is quite reminiscent of a bit like the X3 actually, honestly. But I mean, not saying it's not nice. It's a rather nice design, but they seem to have copied it from the X3 or something similar to that, or probably the GLC, I'm not very sure. Alright, so in this case, this model uses RON 91 minimum. That's nice. Tail lights are LED as well. Really nice. Looks stylish at night. And then you have the reverse on this side and the fog light on this side, which is something I don't really like. It feels off, asymmetrical. So the reverse light would on here, and then you have the rear fog light only on this side, a small little bit here. I don't really like it. The tailgate seems to be standard, if I'm not wrong. It's automatic. Auto tailgate is quite nice. Sometimes it glitches. I notice. Actually, this whole car, it glitches in certain situations, like sometimes the tailgate just freezes halfway without warning, or the car software just glitches. So that's, yeah, it's kind of a quirk. Let's close the tailgate here. Quite roomy. Luggage, you can store quite a few luggages and a lot of grocery shopping. Not an issue. So you have to look at the side here. Overall, it's quite a nice design actually. The car does come with a blind spot monitor, rear cross traffic alert, and all that sort of modern jazz. And now let's take a look at the driver's control. So I'm just gonna turn it on in ignition mode. Alright, so as you can see here, it has a really nice modern display. But then there's quite a few quirks of this car. So for instance, if there's any warnings or any messages right here, you cannot dismiss them. There's no way you can dismiss them. You just have to wait a few seconds for it to dismiss itself, and then you can just move on. But it's quite irritating at times because this warning pops up like quite often actually. And also one more thing, when you have the lane departure system turned on, and you veer off lane, or when it corrects your driving, then yeah, there's a lot of message. Let's wait. Yeah, so when you turn on the lane departure system, it switches to that. When you go back to another menu and it corrects your driving, you force you to go back to the ADAS system screen, and then you're stuck there, and then you have to go back again. And also another quirk of this car, every time I start, is that the settings, they don't seem to stick. So I turn off the lane departure warning. Sometimes it turns itself on when I start the car, and sometimes it doesn't. It's very inconsistent. And also there's also quite a few driving modes here, but another quirk is when I start the car, turn off and on the car again, it resets itself back to normal mode. And I prefer to drive it in custom mode or eco mode. When I turn off the engine, I have to reset it again. So it's like every time I turn on the car, I have a lot of buttons to push, a lot of things to press. The infotainment system is also quite glitchy. If I want to connect to a phone, I have to go to more, and then I have to go to settings. Half the time it doesn't connect by itself, so I have to go to Bluetooth, and then finally I have to connect my phone. I have to pair with the device. After I pair, I have to go back home. If I want to play music, it doesn't go to Bluetooth mode by default. I have to tap on music, and then I have to select from USB music to Bluetooth music. It's quite frustrating actually. I have to toggle all these settings just to start the car. It doesn't stick. And this is honestly the first car I've ever driven with all these features that don't persist after I turn off and on the car, which is quite irritating really. Aircon wise, it's quite cold, but not as cold as Toyota. It doesn't cool down really quickly. Doesn't really have that much power, cooling power. So that's something to take note of. Usually have to blast the aircon all the way at low and top speed, just to keep the cabin sufficiently cool during the hot weather. Right now it's 31 degrees only. If it's hotter, then it's even worse. Alright, that's the entertainment system. The sound quality is pretty decent. I don't really have any music on hand to play, but it does come with quite a number of stylish features. So I can turn on the 360-degree camera. You can see here it's quite fancy. Alright, so let me close the door for you. Yep, very nice. I can tap and then it shows a 3D image, a really nice 3D image. But as you can see, it doesn't stitch quite well for objects that are on the Z-axis. But on the XY, when it's flat, if the surface is completely flat like a car park lot, then that's where the thing shines. It does it really well. So that's probably an inherent disadvantage of all these 360 cameras. So you can see I tap on the right side and then there's rear. There we go. And then yeah, you have the wide angle images and so on and so forth. So let me switch back to the front. So as you can see, when I turn the steering wheel, the car guides me, which is another really nice feature. Even for the front, when I steer and it's not in reverse mode, it shows a very nice image. And as I said, the software on this is also rather glitchy. There's a lot of things that, yes, they are very featureful, but then sometimes it just glitches. Navigation wise, you have TomTom Maps offline. I believe it's offline or it's semi-connected. It doesn't have a lot of addresses that I need to go. It only has quite a limited number of addresses that I can go to. Half the time I cannot rely on this map. And as you can see here, there's no road here, even though there is a road in Google Maps. And then you have all these things. It's quite nice. Although the database isn't updated, there's quite a lot of gas stations that have closed or changed hands, and in recent months or years even, and it doesn't update. It seems to be from at least 3-4 years ago. Alright, the toggles are rather nice here. And you have here your USB for the car infotainment system, and as well as the 12-volt charger. One thing to note about this system as well, I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, is that there is CarPlay, but there's no Android Auto. Android Auto is apparently in beta mode and it's in selected markets. It's not for everything. The steering wheel, it's made out of faux leather, just like the rest of the dashboard. This seems to be faux leather, soft touch, which is a rather nice thing. I'm not sure about its longevity of the dashboard though, because these things wear out quite fast. And also you can see stuff like the aircon vents here. They're made out of this looks like acrylic, gloss acrylic, so that's something to be wary of when you're cleaning the car. And steering wheel is rather nice. You can see here ADAS is not active, and then I have to switch it back again. Yes. And also for the speed dial, you can see here, if I were to switch to other modes, I will not be able to see the fuel gauge, except for a tiny blip here, which is usually blocked by my steering wheel when I drive. So like this, it's blocked by the wheel. And this dial is honestly not very useful. The speed dials the digits are really small compared to other cars. It kind of takes attention. The screen is huge, but it kind of takes attention away from the speedometer, I've noticed. So I have to stare down at it for more than a brief pause just to look at the speed sometimes. It's not very ideal. The menu system is nice, it's modern, but it's not customizable at all. As far as I'm aware, I've tried to find any menu to customize this, but seems non-existent. So anyway, back to the steering wheel. You have the Super Sport mode. So when I click on Super Sport mode, it has a nice spinning MG logo, and then it has Super Sport mode active. And then I turn it off again. So Super Sport mode feels way more responsive than normal modes, but there's still the inherent turbo and transmission lag. The signals on the left, see when I tap on the left signal, it shows me this camera view, and then right, after a brief pause, there. It's rather useful, rather neat actually. And you have your standard auto headlights, you have your wipers here, and then your cruise control stop here. Sometimes I mistake this for the signal stock, which is quite funny. And you have the steering, you have the pedals here, the shifters. One problem about this pedal shifter is that I switch to drive mode, I cannot override it. I have to first switch it to shifter mode, and then it shows sport mode active, and after that I can shift. So 1, 2, and so on and so forth. Yeah, right now it's gear 1. So if I shift back, it goes back to auto mode. That's a quirk I don't really like about this. And then you have a button for the tailgate here. You have lots of room. You can see here the front passenger. The seats are they look like bucket seats. They're rather comfortable, but the fake leather here, it's quite warm to the rear of my back. That's another thing to note. Nice touch here. Right, and moving on to the sunroof, or rather the panoramic roof. So as you can see here, it opens all the way to the back. It's a nice touch. I think it comes as stock for most of the MG models, MG HS models. So you can see here, and then I can open the glass. Rather nice actually. So with that in mind, let's move on to the rear. And then let's go to the rear. Legroom's rather nice. You can see here it's rather huge. Can climb in and admire the panoramic view. Not bad actually. There's rear aircon vents, which is a nice touch. Even now, not all cars have rear aircon vents, and this is one of them, which is nice. Roomy, with a nice view behind. So let me close the window. Quite comfy, but the rear can be quite hot at times, even with the rear vents on. It feels like something underneath here is warming the vents, and it doesn't feel as cold as the one in front. So that's something to note of. Another thing to note, well, as you can see here, rather roomy. The seats can fold down, as is expected of most cars these days, most SUVs these days. And that's the room here. So let's take it for a drive in a bit. So let's go back and take a look at how the car performs in terms of drivability. So fuel economy wise, I'm going a bit of off-roading. I'm going a bit of city driving, and then there's also highways. I'm going about 100, 110, 120 and so on. Let me see, I'm averaging about, let me see here, about 9.8 liters per 100 km. That's quite close to 10, slightly above 10 kilometers per liter. It's, I would say it doesn't feel very economical compared to what other makes have achieved nowadays, even without hybrid. Probably if you were to get the plug-in hybrid version, it'll be way better, because there's electric motor just helping things out. And I'll go more on the electric motor later. But yeah, I've traveled about close to 1,000 clicks, and I'm still averaging about 9.8 liters per 100 km. That's according to the car display, but of course your mileage may vary. A full tank, I would say it goes about 650 kilometers based on this accumulated mileage. So yeah, it's not exactly economical. Probably it'll be better if you drive more on highways at a lower speed, but yeah, that's pretty much about it. So transmission wise, I would say it's not bad if you are not driving fast, or if you're not stepping too much of the throttle. If you're driving normally, just comfortably within the city limits, or cruising comfortably on a highway, it's fine. But because this car's powered by turbo, so if I step on the throttle now, yeah, there's a significant lag between stepping on the throttle. Just now I went full throttle and actually picking up speed. So if you are going to overtake somebody, it takes some practice. That's all I can say. It takes some practice. And also when I were to override the controls, by the way, to override to a manual, so-called manual gearing, you would have to first switch to the plus or minus. You can't just override using the pedal shifters alone. You have to switch it there, which will convert it to sport mode, say sport mode active, and then from there you can select your gear. And also another issue with this is that the changing of gears between you actually pressing on it and it responding, it takes quite a few seconds, so it's quite laggy from there. As a person that has been driving EV for the past couple of months at least, this car feels a lot more laggy than normal. And before that, I was driving hybrids, and it's way more responsive than this. So probably it's due to the way the engine works. But as you can see, I shifted down and it takes a while. And also the engine brake downshifting, it doesn't really function that well, probably because the engine displacement is not that high. So if I want to slow down, it doesn't slow down that well. I'm now on the second gear, and you can hear the engine whirring very loudly. It's around 5,000 plus RPM right now, which is not very good for the car. Ideally, I want to maintain a reasonable speed going downslope at around gear 2 or 3, and probably at around say 2 to 3,000 RPM. I wouldn't want to go any more lower than that. Yeah, there's quite a bit of lag between you pressing the control to shift up or down gear, and then there's also the lag between actually changing gear, and then finally there's also another lag when you actually are able to use the engine to drive. So yeah, right now it's going about 5,000 RPM, 4.5K. It's fine. It's just not something that I would ideally want to keep on doing for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers, as right now I'm going to do and going to embark. My journey is still another 103 kilometers, and probably half of it will be terrain like this. all these sharp corners and all. Alright, sharp corner coming. I wouldn't comment much about the grip because it's more or less dependent on the tires, but this car seems to do fine with the tires. So far I've driven quite sharp at quite high speeds around corners, and the traction control hasn't yet been okay. There's some screeching. Yep. So that's about the limit of the car. Wouldn't want to go more than that. Handling wise, it's alright. It just drives like a bread and butter car. That's about all I can say. It just drives quite nicely, like a bread and butter car. I wouldn't say it's too sporty or too rough or too much of the off-road feel like Outlander or those pickups, but yeah, it seems to perform quite reasonably well. The air conditioning is fine. It's reasonably cold. It's probably something that you also get from BMW, but in this really hot weather, I would say that Toyota fares way better in this regard. The air conditioning's freezing cold even in hot weather like this, even with a sunroof, a panoramic roof, and followed rather reasonably closely by the Korean cars, Kia and Hyundai, and then you have the other brands, the German makes, the Continental makes, the American models, Cruise, the aircon's not very good, and so on and so forth. So this ranks, I would say, below the Korean makes, but definitely above Cruise, Fords, and what have you. So yeah, there's that. I do have to crank the fan and the temperature up way higher than what I would need to if I were to just do it on a Toyota, even an old model. So yeah, that's something to consider if you are buying this to use in the hot climates like Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, especially Singapore. So finally, here comes the verdict. Would I get this car? I would say it's a maybe. This car, I would best describe this car as a loose confederation of I would say this car is best said as a loose confederation of many features coming together, or even you can say a loose confederation of different car designs and makes. So you have the front grille, the front that looks a bit like Mazda, Mercedes, with the big MG badge, and then you have the infotainment system that feels a bit like Mercedes, but bigger, and also the cluster display. It feels a lot like the Continental makes. That's and then you have the engine, you have the turbo, and then you have the gearing, dual clutch. You have all this faux leather or kind of design, contemporary design right here at the front, and in the back on the seats you have your bucket seats and so on and so forth. There's a lot of features packed into this. They did put some thought clearly into what people want in a normal car, in a bread and butter car of these days, with features, a sporty, not bread and butter car that the young generation would love to have. And admittedly, it's done pretty well. Only time will tell if this car, longevity wise, this will last. But yeah, and you also have all the features, the traffic jam controls, and so on and so forth. So I would say it's a maybe. But then on the other hand, if I want a more refined car, something that works more integrated, that works way better, then I would probably look into the Toyotas, the Hyundais and Kias. Toyotas, even though they don't really have as much technology crammed into the cars as this. It's way more refined. The fuel economy is way better for petrol and hybrids anyway. Yeah, than this. And then the Koreans wise, they do have more features than Toyotas, but not as much as this. At least price make for make, price for price. But yeah, it depends on the price, I guess. Finally, so your mileage will vary, but to me, it's a maybe. I may consider this car if I'm looking for a car like this. So anyway, it's goodbye for now. Please consider liking my video and sharing and subscribing. It helps a lot. I would like to do this, spend more time doing reviews like this, and also spend more time going on tours to film foods that you don't normally see in daily life, but it's yeah. So with that in mind, I do have my Instagram and Patreon page. Please consider giving some support to me. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again soon. So goodbye for now.